Quiet on set. Speed and action.
Those little black boxes, they're called telephones. I'm gonna let you on a little secret about these telephones. They're not gonna dial themselves, okay?
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
My name is Mr. Abigail.
You got duly appointed federal marshal.
I'm not fucking leaving.
Welcome to the official podcast of FootandFriendsOnFilm.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. On today's episode, we're focusing on the legendary Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation, biggest names in Hollywood. We're going through his entire filmography. So go ahead, take your seats, grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, we are the official podcast of FootandFriendsOnFilm.com, where our motto is, any film you have not seen is a new experience. Today, John and I, we sit down, we talk about Leonardo DiCaprio. What else can you say? The guy's a friggin' mensch and a total legend. You know the drill. Let's talk to John. Without further ado, please welcome John H. Foote. So Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the biggest names in Hollywood, one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation. Everybody knows this. Recently, during awards season, when Joaquin Phoenix was swiping up all the best actors, he made a point of recognizing DiCaprio about how he kept running into him at the auditions for everything. It seems that his talent was recognized quite early on. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a child actor on a real silly TV program and made the move to film very quickly. And
You talking about Growing Pains?
Growing Pains,
Yeah, with Kirk Cameron, yeah.
Alan Thicke. And within 2 years of breaking into movies, he was cast as Toby Wolfe in This Boy's Life with Robert De Niro. And he tells the story about a couple years earlier sitting in a movie theater seeing Midnight Run, and his father saying to him, if you play your cards right, if you do your job, you could work with this guy. Watch everything this guy does because he's the best. And DiCaprio took that to heart, watched De Niro, and indeed he was cast opposite De Niro in This Boy's Life, and they're very much adversaries. He's the stepson, and De Niro hates him. De Niro's character hates him just because he can. And he lives for control, and he tries to control Toby, and Toby lashes back at every possible avenue. And DiCaprio's naturalism was what struck critics almost immediately. There was no sense of acting whatsoever. This guy was living the role, as was De Niro, as was the rest of the cast. And I remember Pauline Kael, the great film critic, wrote an essay on this, and she said in her lifetime she had seen 4 actors with what she called bite you on the nose talent. And they were Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so instantly he's in fantastic company and knocked it out of the park opposite De Niro.
And it's interesting that De Niro was such an early and prominent influence on DiCaprio, because De Niro's work, obviously, with Martin Scorsese, legendary. DiCaprio would sort of follow in those footsteps to become a regular in Scorsese films, and right now the 3 of them are all collaborating on Marty's next film.
It's interesting that they're both he and De Niro are muses of Martin Scorsese. Usually muses are women, but in Scorsese's case, his films are so dark and so male dominated. De Niro being his first muse, they work together often, and in the last 20 years, DiCaprio has made some of the best films of the time with Marty Scorsese, and they absolutely love each other. He credits Scorsese with his education in movies. Scorsese will regularly show him older films and talk about why this influenced him, why it was great. And DiCaprio's in. He's bought into it hook, line, and sinker, adores Martin Scorsese. And I think they're going to continue making films for years to come.
We can only hope.
I hope. I do hope.
Friend of the show, former classmate of mine at Toronto Film School, Daniel von Diergaart, he loves to cite What's Eating Gilbert Grape as one of, if not his favorite, DiCaprio performances, because he explains it as though when first time he saw it, he thought they found a mentally handicapped kid and they taught him to read lines.
So did I. So did I. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I didn't make the connection between DiCaprio from This Boy's Life and DiCaprio from Gilbert Grape. I watched the film and I thought, wow, good for Lasse Hellstrom. He found a mentally handicapped teenager and drew that performance out of him. That's really cool. And then I got reading about it, reading the press notes, and realized, oh my God, that's the guy from This Boy's Life. I couldn't believe it. His performance as Arnie is one of the most absolutely astonishing pieces of acting in the history of the movies. I don't think it was ever given the credit it deserved. He was nominated for the Oscar. I don't know why he didn't win. I don't know why he didn't get all 5 slots that year for his performance. The LA Film Critics gave him their Best Supporting Actor award. The National Board of Review gave him theirs. Everybody did, except the damned Academy. And it was really sinful. Not only does he portray a mentally handicapped teenager to perfection, he captures the movement and the jerking and the erratic movements and the speech patterns to absolute perfection. It's just a remarkable piece of acting.
Yeah, it really is. Let's talk about the Basketball Diaries. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a biographical film about Jim Carroll, who found himself addicted to drugs, heroin, I believe, and it never really got the attention I thought it deserved. I think there's 2 great performances in this film. Mark Wahlberg, who was on the rise, like DiCaprio, doing every audition imaginable, and Leonardo DiCaprio. And DiCaprio is absolutely brilliant. He's got a scene outside the door of his mother where he's begging her for $20 and he needs a hit. He says, and what he says, I'm going to be a good boy. Please give me another chance. I'm a good boy, blah, blah, blah. He literally breaks down, just crumbles. And you get a great insight to that point about the power of this drug over him. And he's gone, hook, line, and sinker. He is into this drug and it owns him. It governs his life. And DiCaprio neither drinks nor does drugs. And yet he portrays, as he does later in his career in The Wolf of Wall Street,
Right.
he portrays a guy under the influence of drugs magnificently. You would swear that this is the real deal, that he's shot up and they plunked him in front of the camera. But no, it's a performance, and a damn good one. The best thing in the film.
1995, DiCaprio appeared in Sam Raimi's revisionist Western, The Quick and the Dead.
Yeah, this was fun. This is a fun movie.
This is a fun movie, yeah.
You can almost see DiCaprio playing Billy the Kid at this point in his life, and I have no doubt he took influence from that, watching old films. Paul Newman as Billy the Kid, watching it with this, I'm the cock of the walk, the fastest draw in the West kid, until he meets his match. Big glamorous movie star performance. He's opposite Gene Hackman, a wonderful actor, and Sharon Stone, who when she's trying, can be really good. And everybody in this film, I think, was really, really good, including Russell Crowe, kind of at the beginning of his career. DiCaprio steals it. Good, solid performance. Nothing awards worthy, nothing like that, but an entertaining movie. And he was making the leap from actor to movie star and doing it very quickly.
Taking William Shakespeare and plopping it into a modern setting is something that's been done many, many times. In 1996, DiCaprio played Romeo in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to make Shakespeare accessible to the generation today is to update it, to plunk it into modern stories or different stories. It doesn't have to be in Shakespearean time, because frankly, they're not interested. But if you do what they did here and plunk it in the world of gangs, which has been done before with West Side Story,
Yeah.
It was exciting and it had real energy. Right from the opening frame, where a newscast introduces the House of Montague and the other one. And DiCaprio as Romeo is spectacular. I mean, the guy looks like a dream. He was so good looking when he was younger. Claire Danes is a terrific Juliet. And you never know that they hated each other. The love they put on screen was so pure, so realistic, yet the two of them despised each other. They could barely tolerate being near each other. Um, it was a big box office hit for him, which was kind of the first time he really had a monster hit out of the box, and also very well reviewed. Some critics believed he was the quintessential Romeo on screen, which I quite agree with. I thought he was terrific, and a really interesting film from Baz Luhrmann. I wish Luhrmann would make more movies because he's a gutsy director. He doesn't always hit it out of the park, but when he does, he's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Marvin's Room puts DiCaprio on screen with Meryl Streep, Diane Keaton, Robert De Niro.
Yeah, it was a chance for him to surround himself with great actors and observe them, watch them work. And he said it was a going to work every day was a master class in acting. All I had to do was sit back and watch. And again, he's working with De Niro. He's also working with Streep, the greatest actress in the English language, and Diane Keaton, one of the best working, period. And he just, he went to work every day. He learned a lot. He did his job. He doesn't have a great part in the film. It's very much a supporting role. Any young actor could have played the part. Mark Wahlberg, Joaquin Phoenix, just about any of them could have stepped in and done the job. But it was DiCaprio that got the part, and he learned so much working on the film and took that with him when he moved on to the next group of movies.
Only a year after playing Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, he got a taste of massive box office success with a film. And I believe the story was James Cameron pitched this movie by presenting a painting of the RMS Titanic half submerged with all the lights on. And he went to the studio execs and he said, Romeo and Juliet on this.
That's it. That's what he did. What they didn't count on was it taking 2 studios to produce it, because they were terrified they were going to go broke. The budget for this movie eventually hit $200 million in 1997. That's nearly triple what it would be today. And there was genuine terror that 2 studios could go bankrupt over a single film. And nobody saw Titanic coming. No one thought it would be the success it would be. I made a comment on live television saying that it will be the biggest dud in movie history, and boy, did I eat those words. DiCaprio, sorry, you're going to ask?
No, I think you mentioned that it was all the young ladies who went to see it 10 times that made the box office.
I certainly think that's part of it. I saw it with the press, obviously, and then Sherry wanted to see it, so we went back. And there was a row of girls sitting behind us who were literally quoting the movie. I had to turn around and ask them to stop, that my wife hadn't seen it. Please be quiet. They'd obviously seen it at least 10 times, enough to quote every piece of dialogue. And not just the main characters, the supporting and the single line characters. They knew the movie inside out. And sobbing uncontrollably at the end when he dies and then comes back in the dream sequence when the old lady dies. I mean, I often knock the movie for its screenplay, and I stand by that. It's a lot of Jack Rose, Jack Rose, Jack Rose, but the love story is spectacular. You believe every ounce of passion that he and Kate Winslet have for each other. And DiCaprio has the gift that Brando had. He can make every line he delivers sound like it's being delivered for the first time, and with a purity and an authenticity that most actors wish they had. And he did that in this movie. It's a big, fat movie star performance. And he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant in it from beginning right through to the end. When the movie was nominated for 14 Academy Awards, he was the one left out. And it was a tough year. You had Robert Duvall, Jack Nicholson, Dustin Hoffman, Matt Damon, Peter Fonda, Al Pacino should have been there for Donnie Brasco. It was a big year. So, I get why DiCaprio wasn't there. But it's a tough call because it was the 2 actors, Winslet and DiCaprio, that brought this movie to life. Without them, it sinks. Literally, it sinks. No pun intended.
Yeah.
And he gave it life and became a massive movie star, like a worldwide, huge, bigger than God movie star overnight.
I remember being a kid in school and all the girls were in love with Leo, and I didn't even know who he was. And my dad, he took me to see Titanic. He's like, you need to see this movie. And we went and saw it, and I was like, as much as I want to hate this guy, I kind of see it. I get where it is. I get why they're all in love with him.
Yeah, I mean his talent can't be denied. It truly
No.
can't. And the movie has grown on me, I have to admit. I still struggle with the screenplay. I still think it's a dumb movie. But man, Cameron put on a hell of a show. And he's true to the actual sinking of the Titanic. Once they hit that iceberg, it's in real time. That's how long it took for that ship to sink. And the visual effects, the cinematography, the score, it's got one of the most beautiful scores ever written. And it's so simplistic in what it is, yet beautiful. And do I share with it winning Best Picture? No. LA
No.
Confidential and The Sweet Hereafter were better films that year. But it's a tough argument to say it's not a great film.
It has grown on me also, and I do admire James Cameron for his documentary work, and he, has spent more time with that ship than any of the passengers did, and he's really passionate about it. You can see that in the execution.
You absolutely can. My biggest problem with James Cameron is his colossal ego.
Yeah.
And it's there. And the fact that he had so little regard for the money of two studios. He didn't know this movie was going to be a hit. He had no idea. But he was going to make the movie that he wanted to make. And if it failed, it failed. He did the same thing with Avatar. He had no idea that was going to be a big hit, but it was. And lucky for him it was, because he'd be directing independent documentaries if he had two failures like this in a row.
The stories of James Cameron's ego and the fact that I think Avatar is not nearly as deserving of any of the hype that it gets.
It dances with wolves in space, Nick.
It
That's
dances with
what it
Smurfs.
is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that was just knowing what a dick James Cameron can be was one of the reasons I was so happy when Avengers Endgame dethroned Avatar. I was like, yeah.
Take that.
Yeah. And now the thing is, it's like Avatar 2, 3, and 4 are all supposed to come out, and it's not the first time I've said this about James Cameron. A, how long does it take to make a fucking sequel? And B, does anybody care anymore?
Well, an entire generation is going to be hearing of Avatar for the first time when the sequels come out. Avatar was in 2009.
Yeah.
And that's 11 years ago. And we're not going to get the sequels till next year, maybe.
Maybe, exactly.
And who knows? Knowing James Cameron, who knows?
I'm sure it'll be very pretty to look at.
Yep.
In 1998, Leonardo DiCaprio gives what I think is a pretty masterful double performance in an okay, decent movie, The Man in the Iron Mask.
Yeah, it's a cool little historical film, great fun, kind of an old-fashioned swashbuckling thing, including the Three Musketeers, and he plays King Louis the 15th or 14th,
14th, yes.
Who's a perfect ass, and Philip, his brother, who he's locked away with the Iron Mask in the dungeons. And the Three Musketeers rally to bring the decent guy to the throne. It's got one truly great scene, and it's where the Musketeers are charging the king's soldiers, who are armed with muskets. And they've only got swords, but they don't turn away. And one of the guys standing in the front, who's about to be cut down by the Musketeers, looks at them and says, "My God, what valor." And you just get a chill watching it. And DiCaprio's very good. You're right. It's a double performance. He plays a good guy. He plays a bad guy. Surprisingly good as the bad guy. He gets to do that later with Django Unchained and was terrific in that movie. This one didn't do great at the box office. Critics were kind of lukewarm to it, but I enjoyed it from beginning to end. Had a great cast. John Malkovich, good group of people.
Yeah, I still, one moment sticks out for me where Louis is speaking to Philippe, and Philippe begs him to kill him, and he says, "Just please don't put me back in the mask." And then Louis says, "You will go back into the mask." He says, "Wear it until you love it and die in it."
Yep.
Yeah, pretty chilling.
It is that.
1998 united DiCaprio with Woody Allen in the film Celebrity.
Yeah, he more or less played himself in this, and that's what Woody Allen wanted. He wanted someone good-looking and glamorous to play a smarmy, entitled young punk. And DiCaprio had a reputation as a party boy. He did not have a reputation as a smarmy young punk. So it was a bit of a stretch for him to play this guy, but he did it and brought a really great energy to the movie. It's brought down by Kenneth Branagh's complete imitation of Woody Allen. I mean, he imitates Woody Allen as nobody ever has before, but not very well was the problem. DiCaprio's great. I mean, he's not in the movie enough, quite frankly, because he gives it a real great jolt of energy. That's really all I've got to say on Celebrity. Not one of Woody Allen's better films. DiCaprio made it, and that's that.
Yeah, I remember watching it and seeing Branagh in the movie, and I'm just thinking, I was like, why the fuck didn't Woody Allen just play the role himself?
Exactly. And I think it was at a point in Woody's career where he was getting older, and if he was romancing a younger woman, he looked ridiculous. He looked like a dirty old man.
Yeah.
And with the press saying that's what he was, he just didn't want to go there.
I will, however, say I do think Branagh is a genius and he's a master of accents.
He's a great director. He's a great actor, but he's made some beauties. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Oof. Stanko, man.
Yeah, Wild Wild West.
Yep. He's gold. When he's good, he's great. His 4-hour Hamlet is fantastic from beginning to end. And he used every word of the script, which no one had ever done before, and is a wonderful movie. So when he's on, he's on.
Mm-hmm. Next movie we're going to talk about, 2000's The Beach. I actually haven't seen this one.
It's an okay movie. It's a Danny Boyle film. In between, Titanic and The Beach, DiCaprio had turned down some pretty high-profile movies. He turned down the lead in Boogie Nights, which I think Mark Wahlberg does a great job. DiCaprio would have made this movie one of the great films of all time. He turned that down. He turned down several other films, and then finally did The Beach. He actually pulled out of American Psycho to do The Beach, and I think he's sorry he did, because as good a director as Danny Boyle is, Boyle directed Trainspotting, 127 Days, Slumdog Millionaire. This one just doesn't work on any level whatsoever. And so DiCaprio tries. Pardon?
I'm not missing a whole lot then.
No, I mean, I think you should see every film, good or bad, to appreciate the good ones. But this one just doesn't work. I'm glad I saw it, because I watched the arc of DiCaprio's career and saw his evolution as an actor. I'm glad I've seen that from beginning to end. But no, you're not missing much.
2002, DiCaprio gets to work with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks in a movie I absolutely love, Catch Me If You Can.
I think this is the movie where DiCaprio became an adult as an actor. They talk about John Travolta in Blowout. He had done Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and Urban Cowboy. But in Blowout, he became an adult. And I think DiCaprio left the young teenage or early 20-something actor behind as Frank Abagnale in Catch Me If You Can. Spielberg gives the movie a real frothy, jaunty, bouncy feel. It's a true story about a guy who passed over $2 million in bad checks and faked that he was, at various points in his career, an airline pilot. God, how the hell do you fake that? But he did.
Couldn't today, not the post 9/11 world.
No, but then he was a lawyer. He actually passed the bar, though he'd never studied. He was a doctor. I mean, this guy just conned everybody. And DiCaprio really creates an interesting guy, showing us why he did it. Came from a broken home. His parents' divorce gutted him, just ended him as a human being. And he actually adopts Tom Hanks, the FBI guy chasing him, as a surrogate father. There's a real heartbreaking scene where he calls Hanks on Christmas, and Hanks says to him, "You've got no one else to call." And it's true. It's absolutely true. And that's when Hank's character, Henratty, starts to have sympathy for him, feel for him, realize that he's a kid in trouble and he doesn't know how to get out of it. Just a great film. One of Spielberg's best. And I'm really shocked the Academy ignored it as they did. 2 nominations. And I think DiCaprio should have been a nominee. I think Spielberg should have been a nominee.
It's endlessly rewatchable.
It is. I never get tired of watching it. And it's a fun movie. That scene where he's almost caught by Hanks and bluffs his way out of it.
Yeah.
Just classic. I mean, the guts that guy has, and he pulls it off.
And a great score.
Wonderful score. And I love those opening credits, those animated credits. and a great Christopher Walken performance. You
Yeah.
know, Walken so often plays a dangerous guy or a weird guy. He doesn't always get to play just a human being. And he's wonderful here as his father, just a decent man who knows his son's going down the wrong road, is screaming to help him, but he can't. And he can't. He's part of the reason why.
There's a great line from Christopher Walken in there, which I think kind of epitomizes the whole movie. Frank, you ever wonder why the Yankees always win? Because they got Mickey Mantle? He's like, nah, because the other teams can't keep their eyes off those damn pinstripes.
Very true. Very true.
That same year was the first. Okay, so this movie is one of my favorites, and it started my love affair with Martin Scorsese. I remember me and a couple of buddies. Oh God, 2002. How old would we have been? Maybe we're around 16 or something like that. And oh no, even younger than that. Anyway, we get a bunch of weed and we go to the local video store when you could rent videos, and it's like, let's just get a movie. And I saw on the shelf Gangs of New York. I'd never seen a Martin Scorsese movie before. Something struck me, and I'm like, this is the one we're gonna watch. And I love it. I know you recognize it as having flaws, which I think it's great. And DiCaprio is certainly not the best thing in it, although I think he's good. But I remember thinking, who is this Daniel Day-Lewis guy?
Yeah. I saw it when it first came out, with the critics, 2002, and I had looked forward to it for a year because they actually postponed it due to 9/11.
Right.
And I remember anxiously waiting for it to start and unspool, and it did. And I was in. That opening scene knocked me on my ass. I was stunned. And Neeson gets killed, and then DiCaprio goes away and comes back, and I'm with it, and then Cameron Diaz shows up.
Yeah.
And the chasm kind of opened in front of me, and the movie started to fall apart. DiCaprio is good. Daniel Day-Lewis is off the chart brilliant.
Yes.
And DiCaprio just seemed overpowered by the Day-Lewis performance. I'm not sure who wouldn't be, in fairness. Daniel Day-Lewis, when he takes it to mind, can blow anyone off the screen. And he does it here. Scorsese fought violently with Harvey Weinstein to maintain the length of the movie. I'm not sure it needed to be as long as it was. And you know me, I'll watch anything long as it's good. It started to wear down for me by the time they were sending the Irishmen to fight the Civil War. We still had another half hour to go. And the final fight scene between the two of these guys is terrific, although you really can't see a hell of a lot because there's all this smoke and fog going on. I think it's a big, ambitious, awkward movie that has moments of greatness in it, but at the end of the day isn't a great film. And I think DiCaprio, he's good. He was discovering himself as an actor, and I think his collaboration with Scorsese and his collaboration with Day-Lewis made him a better actor. And in his next film with Scorsese, he became a great actor.
That film, of course, is The Aviator, where he played Howard Hughes.
Yes, Warren Beatty had long wanted to make a film about Howard Hughes, and he wanted to make more of a movie about Hughes when he was the recluse living in the hotel with the long beard and the toenails and the fingernails, but he could just never get the money together to do it. At one point, he was going to just direct it, and Jim Carrey talked about playing Howard Hughes. That would have been very interesting. But Scorsese had a script sent to him with young Howard Hughes that dealt with the Hollywood era. And being a fanatic about movie history, he was hooked. He read it once and he was down. He spoke to DiCaprio and said, I think you'd make a great young Howard Hughes. You look like him. We might be able to pull this off. And they cast the movie with major Hollywood stars in smaller parts, Cate Blanchett having perhaps the biggest role as Katharine Hepburn. And DiCaprio as the young Howard Hughes is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. Money means nothing to him. Money means that you can get things and have things. And money means that you can cash in your money and get more money if you're smart about it. Money means that you can get loans to get more than you possibly ever will need and turn that into staggering wealth, which is exactly what he did. He was shooting a silent film called Hell's Angels when sound broke. And rather than release the silent film, he scrapped all the silent sequences and reshot everything with sound at a cost of $1.5 million and released the movie as it was. It's still, some of the flying sequences in that film are stunning. because they're the real deal. They were real biplanes, cameras on the plane, lives were risked shooting that movie. And I think Howard Hughes was a visionary. I don't think he's ever been given enough credit for what he did in Hollywood. Um, DiCaprio captures his illnesses, the mental illness, the beginning of the mental illness that we see, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to watch him because he can't snap out of it. Once it starts, he can't get out of it. And there's that stunning scene where he's in the screening room, and he's been in there for weeks, peeing into bottles and eating and drinking the exact same thing, sitting there naked, watching movies. And it's just a stunning performance. The film was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. It won 5, but it lost what everyone thought it would win: Best Director and Best Picture. I think everyone was down that year with Jamie Foxx winning Best Actor. I'd have been okay with DiCaprio winning. I think he was terrific.
Continuing his work with Martin Scorsese, in 2006, they released an absolute masterpiece, The Departed.
Yep, good words, good call. An absolute masterpiece. It's a remake of a Hong Kong film, Infernal Affairs, and DiCaprio plays Billy Costigan, who soars through the police academy, the state police academy. His IQ is off the charts, and he's recruited by a captain and his assistant, played by Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg, to infiltrate the Costello crime family. For this, he'll have to revoke his police privileges and go to jail. He has to serve time, but then he goes deep undercover into the world of Frank Costello. Costello is played by Jack Nicholson in a masterfully perverse performance, and he has his own mole inside the police department, played by Matt Damon. And it's an intense, tension-filled movie. DiCaprio is absolutely superb as Costigan. He's terrified most of the time and horrified he's going to be caught because he knows what they'll do to him, and it'll include torture before they kill him. And Scorsese finally won his long overdue Academy Award for Best Director. I was shocked that DiCaprio wasn't nominated for Best Actor for this. He was nominated that year, but for another film called Blood Diamond. And I stand by. I think it should have been for this one. I think his performance is superior.
I think his performance as Billy Costigan in The Departed is one of his finest pieces of work.
I agree. Top 5 for sure. For sure. He's superb.
You mentioned Blood Diamond, for which he was nominated for Best Actor that year. This is a good movie. It's actually a movie that I found incredibly disturbing, more than any horror film I could remember having seen. And DiCaprio is really good in it, and he manages to pull off what I, as an actor, would call the hardest accent to pull off, and that's South African.
Yeah, most actors say that, and I quite believe it. Listening to him talk in that movie, listening to Denzel Washington in Cry Freedom, and Matt Damon in the Clint Eastwood film Invictus,
Yeah.
very, very difficult accent. And in this movie, he plays Danny Archer, who's kind of like a Bogart character, kind of a badass who strides both sides of the law, mostly the opposite side. And he pretends to help this black guy go back to find his son, but what he's really going back to find is the blood diamond, this massive blood diamond that this guy is rumored to have hidden and knows where it is. And over the course of the film, Danny realizes his greed and why everything about what he's doing is wrong, because the blacks are being used, they're being horribly exploited and massacred to dig up these diamonds. And he changes his perspective and helps the man escape back to civilization with his son at the cost of his life. Edward Zwick directed the movie, and Zwick is hot and cold. He directed Glory, which is a masterpiece, and a few other decent movies. I love The Last Samurai, which
So do I, yeah.
one of Cruise's best performances. And Blood Diamond's one of his best films. He again draws great work out of DiCaprio and Jimon Hunsu, who plays the black man that he helps, and Jennifer Connelly, who plays a journalist who is doing an article that DiCaprio helps her complete. Solid movie, absolutely solid movie. And DiCaprio did get the nomination for Best Actor. I just stand by, as I think you do. I think he deserved it more for The Departed.
Yeah, I believe that Jimon Honshu is utterly brilliant in Blood Diamond.
He's a great actor. He's got such a great presence. I mean, he wasn't nominated for Gladiator, but he damn well should have been. Doesn't say much, but he's terrific in the movie.
Yeah, he's always very interesting to watch. So let me just check my notes here where we're at. After Blood Diamond, DiCaprio made a film with Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott, which I'm going to call utterly forgettable because I saw it and I don't really remember much of it. Body of Lies.
Me too. Me too. And I think it's one of Ridley Scott's weakest films. Ridley Scott, when he's great, he's great. He's one of the top directors working. Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator. But when he's bad, he stinks. And his worst film, the worst film he ever made, was Exodus: Gods and Kings, the remake of the Ten Commandments with Christian Bale. Just dreadful. Just a horrible piece of filmmaking. And
So
this
awful,
one,
we didn't mention it in our biblical podcast.
well, we should have, but I've got nothing good to say about it. This one, you're right. It's completely forgettable. I mean, I saw it when it first was released. I've not saw it since, and I have no interest in seeing it ever again.
That same year, he worked with Sam Mendes and reunited with Kate Winslet for Revolutionary Road.
And this is one of those movies, you know, that you watch it, you rave about it. I think this is one of the best films of the year, one of the 5 best movies of the year. And then it disappeared. It disappeared from theaters. Critics loved it. You know, I don't remember reading any bad reviews for it, but it just didn't spark an interest. And they are both fantastic as a young couple in the 50s, suburbanites with a family, who are struggling. You know, they're each lonely. They're in their own world. He has an affair. She was an actress in college and wants to live a bohemian lifestyle. They decide they're going to move to Paris, and then they cancel that. And she can't forgive him for canceling that. That was her dream, to go do that. And she ends up aborting a child that she has and bleeds to death, dies. And he's left at the end alone and horribly, horribly guilty. They have one of the most intense, horrific arguments by a married couple I've ever seen in a movie. It's uncomfortable. The only one I've seen surpass it was this year in Marriage Story. It's that remarkable. The only person nominated from the film was Michael Shannon for supporting actor, and it was nominated for its art direction. I mean, I think this should be up for Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, Actress. Kate Winslet won the damn Academy Award that year for The Reader, which is a horribly irresponsible film, and her performance is supporting. Her best performance that year was in Revolutionary Road. She'd still won the Oscar had she been nominated for this. It was that good a performance. And I don't understand why it slipped through the cracks. I really don't. I don't know why. It's virtually forgotten.
In pardon me, 2010, he was reunited with Martin Scorsese in the film adaptation of a Dennis Lehane novel called Shutter Island, where he plays Teddy Daniels, a U.S. federal marshal who is called to an island containing Ashcliff Hospital, which is a mental hospital for the criminally insane. And this movie plays a lot like a horror movie from Scorsese.
It does. It's kind of a grand gothic horror movie in a lot of ways. And as it unfolds and we see the puzzles starting to fit together and who he really is, who Teddy Daniels truly is, if you watch it a second time, it's interesting that all the hints are there. All the hints are there. Right from the opening scene where they're coming in on the boat and he has to bum cigarettes and the one guy's clean shaven and he isn't. And then we find out why. He's very much a patient in that psychiatric hospital. And they're doing an experiment hoping it will jar him back to life. And it's a terrific movie. It was postponed. It was to be released in 2009. And for some crazy reason, they bumped it into 2010. And I've never really understood why. It would have been an Oscar movie in 2009. It would have been end of the year. They'd have had to nominate it. And instead, they released it in the spring of 2010. And by the end of the year, it's forgotten. And DiCaprio gives a really fine performance, creepy in a lot of ways. That scene where he's pulling his children, his drowned children, out of the pond, and his wife is smiling, saying that we can dress them, use them as little dolls, is really terrifying, really, truly terrifying. and makes you think, what would Scorsese do with a true horror movie? Um, I love this movie. I think it's one of his best performances.
I love it too. I actually watched it just within the last week.
Yeah.
Um, I have one really sort of massive regret with this movie, and it's just sort of unfortunate, is that I had read the book, and so I didn't get to discover the plot twist.
Oh boy, I didn't. I hadn't read the book, and I've seen enough movies to pick up on twists and clues and things. And when it finally happened, I wasn't at all surprised, but I was surprised they hit it so well. And most people in the screening room with the critics just gasped. And it was like Fight Club. You're kidding. Holy shit. Really? And watch the movie, guys. The hints are all there.
Yeah, I recently, when I watched it with my mother, and I watched it I was more observing her watching the movie
Yeah.
because I wanted to see, and she was stunned
Yeah.
when the twist came about.
Yeah. My brother was too. We watched it together one night. I was at his place and it came about and he was knocked in his ass. Just blew him away.
That same year, he worked with one of my favorite directors and one of my favorite films. I think it's one of the best science fiction movies and one of the trippiest movies ever made, Christopher Nolan's Inception.
This is a great movie. He plays Dom Cobb, who is a scientist who works in dreams and allows people to go into their dreams. And it has some of the most extraordinary set pieces I've ever seen. You know, moments that you can't quite believe, am I really seeing this? There's a moment he's walking through a city with Ellen Page, and it's her dream, I believe, and part of the city starts to come up to form a cube. And you're watching it thinking, is this really happening? And I found it, the first time I saw it, I found it confusing. Went back to see it a second time and was fine. Got it from beginning to end. It's beautifully acted by DiCaprio, by Michael Caine, by everybody all the way through the movie. And that's a pretty tough task, you know, to get great performances in a movie that's so filled with effects and spectacle. And yet Nolan always seemed to do that. He's just a very gifted man.
Yeah, it was one of those movies where I didn't sleep that night. Ironically, I guess,
Yeah.
because I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, "Oh my god!" And I remember sitting in the theater. What was the moment? It was the moment when him and Ellen Page wake up and they're in the room, and he says to Arthur, "Give us another 5 minutes," and she's like, "We were just talking for like an hour." And
Yeah.
and they explain how time runs differently in dreams because 5 minutes in the real world gives you an hour in the dream. And I remember thinking, yes, I can't think of the number of times I've been in a dream that felt like it lasted hours, and then I wake up and realize I've been asleep for 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, it really is incredible. And for the actors to give themselves over to Nolan in the way that they do is quite a remarkable feat. DiCaprio does it with Scorsese. He trusts them. But, you know, Nolan is a different kind of director. Yet he gave himself over to him completely to play Dom Cobb and gives what I think is one of his best performances.
Yeah, it's really, really, and it's reminiscent of Shutter Island because there's this whole thing about his kids and what's real and not real. There's some similarities there.
Well, what about the ending when he spins the top? Is that happening or is he in a dream?
Well, I remember being in the theater and you see the totem spin and it wobbles a bit and it cuts to black. And I heard so many people go, "Oh," and I clapped. And I was like, I just remembered something Roger Ebert said, and he said, movies are what they show us, no more, no less. And so the ending, as far as I'm concerned, is ambiguous. And Nolan has since confirmed that. He said, the point is that it didn't matter if it was real or not because he saw his kids' faces, and that's all that mattered.
That's right. And Ebert's very astute to say that because so many people read into films, but visually, it is what it is. You know, you watch Saving Private Ryan. They can never change the cut from the old man in the cemetery to Tom Hanks' face on the ship. I mean, that tells us that old man is Tom Hanks, but it's not. It's not. Visually, they've told us that. It's a fact, but it's not true. And you're absolutely right. Visually, they tell us things in Inception, and they stick with them.
And I was so happy that it cut to black. Christopher Nolan has the ability to end a fucking movie in like the perfect way. So many of his movies, the last shot is brilliant. Batman Begins, when they're on the roof of the Gotham City Police headquarters, and Gordon says, "I never said thank you," and Batman says, "And you'll never have to," and he just flies off the roof, and the title comes up. Same with The Dark Knight. Same with Inception. Same with Dunkirk. Like the last shot, he just knows how to put a button on a movie in a way that I think is kind of unrivaled.
Interstellar is up there too with how he ends them.
Yeah, absolutely.
How to do it.
2011 pitted him with Clint Eastwood in a biopic of J. Edgar Hoover. Now, I think his performance in this movie is brilliant. However, I think he's way too good looking to play J. Edgar Hoover.
I do too, and I kind of struggle with the script and Eastwood's portrayal of J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was a prick. He was a power-hungry, vile little man who struggled with his homosexuality, was ashamed of his homosexuality, and did his best to hide it by gathering evidence on everybody else, so that if anyone ever threatened to exploit him or expose him, he had a file on them. And when he died, that scene of his secretary cleaning out his files, that's a fact. Nobody knows where his files are. He kept them that well hidden. You're right, DiCaprio is too good looking to play J. Edgar Hoover. He was a squat, ordinary looking little man, not a 6 foot good looking guy. But he captures his paranoia. He captures his ambition and his viciousness. I mean, that threat that he gives Bobby Kennedy so casually as he's walking out of the office. By the way, I have copies of all of this. I mean, it's just underhanded and insidious. The Screen Actors Guild and the Golden Globes nominated him for Best Actor. The Academy did not. And critics were pretty rough on him for this film. And I don't believe it's his fault. I think the failure is in Eastwood and Dustin Black in the screenwriter.
In 2012, DiCaprio worked for the first time with Quentin Tarantino. Now, I believe Quentin Tarantino had originally envisioned DiCaprio for the role of Hans Landa in Inglourious Bastards, a role which, to be honest, I just don't think DiCaprio could have pulled off, having to speak 4 languages and all that. As brilliant as he is, and of course we can't imagine anyone other than Christoph Waltz playing that role.
Well, now that we've seen Waltz, no, you're absolutely right. I personally, I think DiCaprio could have pulled it off. Would he have been as good as Christoph Waltz? Who knows? It would have been different. Let's put it that way. No, we'll never know.
But in this, he played Calvin Candy, a plantation owner in Tarantino's Western/Southern revenge tale, starring Jamie Foxx. He's ruthless in this. He's evil. He's delightful in his evil. And, he says the N-word a hell of a lot. And it's a pretty remarkable performance in a movie full of them.
It is. And his racism is off-putting. It catches you off guard because we know DiCaprio very, very publicly with social media. We know that he's nothing like this guy. But he's terrific. He seems to be rotting as Calvin Candy from the inside. His teeth are rotted.
Yeah.
And he's just a despicable human being. That long ride they take back to the ranch and they come upon a runaway slave and they order the dogs to tear him apart is horrific. And he sits there almost amused by it. He's digging it. He's loving it. And they get to his ranch, and once he's discovered he's being duped, he turns nasty, and he turns extremely nasty. I love the relationship between he and Sam Jackson, Steven, his houseboy. Sam Jackson is just as every bit as underhanded and horrific as Calvin Candy. The two of them are almost one person. I thought DiCaprio and Jackson should have been nominated.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, they nominated Waltz and gave him a second Academy Award for it, for really playing a very similar character, although he's not, too. So
similar mannerisms and a similar delivery.
Yeah, just a confidence, a constant confidence, and maybe that's just him as an actor. I don't know, but I wasn't a believer that he deserved Best Supporting Actor that year.
Neither was I. I was a massive champion of him winning his first Oscar for *Inglourious
Me
Basterds*.
too. Me too. No argument there whatsoever. But
But
here, I think, had Sam Jackson and DiCaprio been nominated, I'd have been okay with Sam Jackson winning. Steven was just a spectacular performance, as was DiCaprio. His first thorough villain, where he dominates the movie. He was a bad guy in The Man in the Iron Mask, but only half a bad guy. Here, he's a full-born maniac. And when he gets shot, people applauded.
yeah,
People applauded in the theater when the dude finally got shot. And long time coming, man.
yeah, he's never more insidious or despicable than when he smacks the gavel on the table and says, "Sold to the man with the exceptional beard and his unexceptional nigger." And
Yep.
he's so fucking just despicable.
It is horrible. And opening up that poor girl's shirt to show the whip stripes. I mean, humiliating. Absolutely humiliating. And yet he's loving every minute of it. And so is Sam Jackson.
Yeah, I was pulling for Tommy Lee Jones that year for that Oscar that Waltz won.
Oh, he was great. He was great in Lincoln.
In 2013, he appeared in 2 films where he played a rich prick. But the first one is one that I don't like this movie for a whole bunch of reasons. That's The Great Gatsby.
Have you read the book?
No, but from what I hear, all the reasons I hate the movie are the same reasons I wouldn't like the book. Here's the thing.
Really read the book
Here's a movie that Baz Luhrmann directed, and he did it in 3D and it's like he did this stunningly modern visual aesthetic on a movie that I'm like, this could be in black and white as far as I'm concerned. I didn't get that. And maybe you can tell me if you've read the book. I know you've seen previous adaptations. I remember halfway through this movie looking across the screen and just pointing in my head and thinking, I don't give a shit about any of these people. They're all pricks, and I hope they all die.
I have read the book. I studied the book in university, and I love the book. I think it's the greatest American novel written in the 20th century.
Yeah.
The previous adaptations of the film, the 1974 version, was very good, with the glaring exception of Gatsby. Gatsby is a criminal. Gatsby has earned his wealth, his riches, very quickly through crime, and he doesn't want that found out. In 1974, Robert Redford played Gatsby, and he just didn't suggest the danger that Gatsby should possess. Jack Nicholson should have played him, or Warren Beatty. The genius of the 1974 film is Bruce Dern as Tom Buchanan. And if you could plunk Bruce Dern into the Baz Luhrmann film and take away the 3D, I didn't watch it in 3D anyway, I don't give a shit about that, you'd have a pretty good movie. I didn't mind the modern aesthetic. I knew it was going to happen because it was Baz Luhrmann, and I was okay with that. What I loved about the movie was finally we have a Gatsby who suggests danger and menace. We knew he was into some horrible stuff because he did his best to keep meetings quiet. He did his best when anyone showed up at his house that he didn't want to see to have them whisked away to a private room. DiCaprio just did everything right as Gatsby. He was charismatic, he was exceptional, and he truly, truly loved Daisy and just was never going to have her because Tom's money was more secure than Gatsby's. Gatsby's business was risky, and Daisy couldn't handle risk. Joel Edgerton is a wonderful actor, but he just didn't suggest Tom to me at all. Bruce Dern did, really did. Carey Mulligan was a wonderful Daisy, flighty, arrogant, an airhead in every way. Loves Gatsby, but not enough. Not enough. I liked the film, and I loved DiCaprio in it.
I should state for the record that I certainly don't think DiCaprio gave a bad performance, and I really don't think that anyone is particularly bad in it. I guess there's just some overlying thing, like I just didn't get it, didn't resonate with me. Maybe I need to check out the book or give it another chance, but that is what it is.
Well, it's okay not to care about the characters. People ranted and raved about The English Patient, and you know how I feel about that movie. And I feel the same. He's got this great scene. Ray Fiennes has this supposedly wonderful romantic scene with Catherine in the cave where he's putting her down to rest while he goes off to get help. And all I could think about was just die. Just die, woman, so we can all go home. I don't believe you. I don't believe in your love. I don't like any of you. die. And you obviously felt similar about Gatsby, and that's cool. That's cool. I happen to like it. That's all.
Yeah, well, that same year, DiCaprio gave a performance which should have won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, also playing a rich prick in one of the funniest movies I have ever seen, Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street.
And again, this is a biography, and Jordan Belfort's a real guy. He really did swindle people out of hundreds of millions of dollars. He lived the life of a king for several years, warned by his father that eventually it's all going to come crashing down, and crashing down it does. And DiCaprio gives a performance for the ages in this movie. This is one of the greatest 10 performances ever given in a movie by an actor. He's spectacular as Jordan Belfort. He's a rock star as Jordan Belfort, whether he's coasting high on drugs or messing around with hookers or fighting with his goddess wife, Margot Robbie, or arguing with his father about overbilling of hookers. He's spectacular. He's absolutely spectacular in the film from beginning to end. And Scorsese gives it an intensity and a fury and an energy that, yeah, this guy is 74 years old when he made this. And Quentin Tarantino this same year said directing is a young man's game. Bullshit, Quentin. Bullshit. Not as long as Eastwood, Spielberg, Scorsese are around. Directing is for whoever can do it.
There's, again, and it's just utterly hilarious. I can't remember having laughed this much in a movie theater. And there's a great scene where DiCaprio, he's taking a Quaalude, which is kicked in, and he's trying to climb into his Lamborghini or whatever it is. And you mentioned earlier that DiCaprio isn't a drinker or a drug user, but I happen to have come across a piece of information. I know what he used for research for this scene. It's a video on YouTube that I had seen prior to having watched The Wolf of Wall Street, and I'll try and link it in the article when I share this podcast. I think it's called The Drunkest Guy Ever. And it's a guy going into a convenience store trying to pick up and purchase a case of beer. And he's barely walking, and he gets to the refrigerator, and he opens it up, and he pulls out the case of beer, and he falls down. And from that point on, when he's trying to stand up, first of all, he won't let go of the case of beer.
Yeah.
But that case of beer has become Thor's hammer, and he is just not worthy. Like, yeah. He cannot. It's absolutely remarkable. And if you see it and you watch the DiCaprio scene, you'll absolutely understand how the two are related. In 2015.
Oh, Nick, we should mention The Wolf of Wall Street was nominated for 5 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actor, and won nothing.
Right.
Despite being far and away the best film of the year, far and away. The actor that defeated DiCaprio for the Academy Award was Matthew McConaughey in Dallas Buyers Club, which isn't even the best performance of Matthew McConaughey's career. Yet, for whatever reason,
McConaughey was better in The Wolf of Wall Street.
He was. I think he was better in True Detective. That last monologue he has about dying is extraordinary. But it was his time, whatever that means.
Yeah, and DiCaprio absolutely should have won.
Yep, no right.
It wouldn't be long before he would. In 2015, DiCaprio appeared in a film directed by Alejandro Inarritu called The Revenant. Now, a couple things to say about this movie. It is based on the real life story of frontiersman Hugh Glass's experiences in 1823, a man who survived being attacked by a bear. The fictional element of the movie is the story of revenge for the murder of his son. In real life, Hugh Glass did not have any children, but nevertheless, his survival story is just as impressive as everything we see in this movie. And I think I'm reasonable in saying that while he did deserve the Oscar, I think they got together and they said, we need to give Leo an Oscar before he kills himself.
I think that happens a lot within the Academy, but I'm of the mind that this was absolutely the best performance of the year. I've heard critics and I've talked to people about the film, and they say, well, he really didn't say much. Okay, why? Why does he have to say anything? The greatest acting you will ever see is when an actor is reacting to what's happening around him or a part of the surroundings. Leonardo DiCaprio absolutely lived The Revenant from beginning to end. He lived it. He was in those elements. He was in the carcass of a dead animal. He was in frozen water. He ate raw liver. He completely went method with this movie. And his body language and his eyes, those haunted eyes, so much pain, so much anger, and ferocity about getting even. I think it's an absolutely astonishing performance. For me, this was the best film of the year. It won Best Director, then lost Best Picture. I don't know how that happens. And DiCaprio finally won his Oscar. I agree that there was a certain amount of sentiment to it, and that happens, and I hate it. I think it happened to a degree this year with Joaquin Phoenix. You know, he should have got it for the Master. He was great in The Joker. They couldn't not give it to him this year, and I think that happened a bit with DiCaprio. But not for a minute do I not think it was the year's best performance. I think he was stunning.
I agree that he deserved it. I just think it. I chuckle thinking about that. You know, the raw bison liver, the animal carcasses. Someone's just like, if we don't give this guy an Oscar, he's gonna hurt himself.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, and a stunning film visually, shot mostly with natural lights. Really something else.
Emmanuel Lubezki won his third consecutive Academy Award for Best Cinematography on this one, and richly deserved it. He's the greatest DOP of his generation. Nobody's even close.
DiCaprio took a little break after The Revenant, up until last year when he reunited with Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. A film I found, look, I liked it. I liked a lot about it. I kind of thought it was underwhelming. Everyone was sort of heralding this as Tarantino's greatest film, which I don't think for a second it is. But I do think DiCaprio and pretty much everyone who's in it gives a brilliant performance.
I agree. I think it was overrated. I don't think for a minute it's his best film. I don't think it's DiCaprio's best performance. I think he's very good. I think he deserved the Academy Award nomination, and he's surrounded by great actors. I love the tone of the movie. I love how it absolutely changes when they arrive at the ranch and the Manson family's there, and it all of a sudden becomes very sinister, and the potential for danger is immediately there. And I love how Brad Pitt handles it, just confidently beats the shit out of a guy who slashed his tires, makes clear to the women that if they come a step closer, he'll do worse to the guy, and he would. And I love the ending. I love the fairy tale aspects to the ending. I especially love DiCaprio's last scenes when he is introduced to Sharon Tate. And it's like Rick Dalton is meeting ghosts, because these people were murdered. They were massacred by the Manson family. And Rick Dalton gets a chance to meet them. And the look on DiCaprio's face is almost beatific, as though when he stepped through those gates, he was stepping into a ghost land. And in that, I think Tarantino nailed it, and DiCaprio nailed it. I was thrilled he was nominated for the movie. I was very happy to see Brad Pitt finally win an Oscar. Here's another example, as you mentioned with The Revenant. They decided this year it was Brad Pitt's year. I think Joe Pesci gave the best performance by a supporting actor, but it was Brad Pitt's time.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't agree with Joaquin Phoenix having won. I know most people do. My vote, I've said this before, goes to a guy who was snubbed for a nomination. I think Taron Egerton should have won Best Actor for playing Elton John, but, to each their own.
And, there's no chance that'll happen after the year they gave it. The year before, they give it to Bohemian Rhapsody. No chance.
Yeah, very
no
undeserved. They should have given it to Christian Bale.
Yeah, Taron Egerton absolutely should have been nominated. Absolutely. But I think the award itself should have gone to Adam Sandler. Gasp.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, DiCaprio and De Niro and Scorsese are all making a movie together. So that should be pretty awesome.
They are. I mean, any time these guys get together to make a film, it's a good thing. The question right now is who's going to produce it. Paramount is shopping it around and looking at selling it. outright to Netflix or Apple or any one of the major streaming companies because the budget is $200 million. And I don't understand Scorsese in this sense because this man has made movies on the cheap for most of his life. He made a biblical epic for pittance, a pittance, and made it look like just as big and glorious as anything ever previously made. And I don't get why he needs so much money to make this movie. He didn't need near this much for Silence. I get why he needed it for his previous film, The Irishman, because of the special effects.
Yeah.
But $200 million for a movie set in the 20s in the desert, really, on reservations? I don't get it.
That film, I think I misnamed it earlier. It's Killers of the Flower Moon, based on the book Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI, nonfiction by American journalist David Gran. I guess it's all kind of tricky to call right now because of the COVID situation, but should we expect to see this movie next year, I guess?
I think they're still shooting it. They were fortunate because they're quarantined, so they can still shoot. They're on location and they're all together, so I believe they're still shooting it. If they get it all together and Scorsese's editor works as fast as Spielberg's editor, we might see it this year. Scorsese's got many films he still wants to do, and he knows that he's going to have to quicken the pace a little bit because he's not getting any younger. He's desperate to make his Roosevelt film. He still talks about making a film about Sinatra. The Roosevelt film takes precedence, of course. Either he or Spielberg are going to make a film about George Washington. So, down the road, DiCaprio and Scorsese are going to continue to work. I think they'll have 3 or 4 more films together before it all ends.
Yeah, I am pretty sure that DiCaprio will be Scorsese's Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And Sinatra, if that happens.
Yeah, although the issues with the Sinatra estate are the problems with that, right?
Yeah, and it may never happen. It may never happen because if they just don't want a lot of things to be told. They don't want to release a lot. They want an obscene amount of money for the music rights. So it may never happen. And what a shame.
Yeah, it's the same reason you'll probably never see a righteous Jimi Hendrix biopic made for a lot of the same reasons. But The Rise of Teddy Roosevelt, Martin Scorsese, the greatest living director, with Leonardo DiCaprio starring as the most badass fucking person who ever lived. Sign me up.
It'd be cool. And I think we're safe in calling DiCaprio one of the greatest actors, easily the best of his generation, one of the greatest actors in movie history. I think he's more than achieved that now.
Yeah, no arguments here. Want to thank John Foote for taking us back to film school. As always, we got a lot of episodes coming up. And we thank you all for listening. Check us out on YouTube and all that good stuff. Happy Easter. Hope you're having a good time. And if there's anything you'd like to hear us talk about on one of these podcasts, please reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. John, thanks again.
I was just going to say that, Nick. If anyone has anything they want us to cover, speak up. Speak up. In the future, we'll be talking about Sean Penn, Holly Hunter, Johnny Depp, Jessica Chastain, directors, genres. So just jump in. Let us know.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 12. Leonardo DiCaprio. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the social medias. But especially check us out on YouTube, where you can find this, all past and future podcasts. Got a lot of cool stuff coming up in the near future. We're going to do an episode on Jane Fonda, little spotlight on the films of the 1980s, all that and much, much more. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies.